Hey, I mentioned earlier, or at the break, stopping the experience. Real quickly, here are some of the people who weren't so lucky as far as stopping this goes. These are all experiencers. Their stories are very well documented or written about either autobiographically or by others, outside researchers. Whitley Strieber, or Stryber, I always mess it up, everyone does. He's the author of several books now. This book stayed on New York Times bestseller list for nearly a year in the late 1980s. It was said to be the first book that took the topic of alien abductions out of the pages of tabloids and actually made people believe that the fellow was telling the truth. And they took it more seriously from then on. Betty and Barney Hill, The Interrupted Journey, is still considered the best documented and one of the most important cases of UFO abduction in history. It was an interracial couple living in the 60s. And the last thing they wanted was to draw attention to themselves. But their story got out when a hypnotist began digging around to explain a missing time episode that they couldn't remember had happened to them. Betty Andreasen Luca is also the subject of many books, and she's considered a very important case. Back to Leah Haley, she at least tried to go to her church for help or for answers on this topic, but was basically given the left boot of fellowship, if you know what I mean. She then sought out psychiatric help, but found out that she wasn't sick, so she could not be cured. Will you shut the door over there, please? Thanks. Sound annoyed, don't I? Gosh. That's just a quick view of the people that have experienced that their stories are documented or claiming extraterrestrial encounters. There's whole books written about many other people's, and there's enough to fill an encyclopedia of extraterrestrial encounters. I wasn't joking. Now, Jacques Vallée, here's the real important fellow I've mentioned him several times. As you can see, this is a very provocative cover. It's you might think it's by a Christian author who's got a negative axe to grind about UFOs and aliens, but it's not. This is from a secular scientist. You already know Dr. Jacques Vallée, whether you know it or not, because if you've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he was the model for the weird scientist guy in that movie. No, he wasn't that weird, but that character was based on Jacques Vallée. And he's also, he invented something called computer networking back in the early 70s. He and other UFO researchers across the globe wanted to share their findings with each other, the stuff they had on their computers. So he headed up at a college in California this thing called the ARPANET, so that UFO researchers could tap each other's computers and share files across great distances. We know what the ARPANET is called now, the Internet. Not Al Gore. Jacques Vallée is actually credited as the inventor of the Internet, and the Internet's sole purpose for being created was for UFO researchers to share information with each other. He's written close to 10 books on the topic from a scientific perspective. They're getting to be valuable because they're out of print. The one I'm displaying is the only book I've ever even had stolen from my storefront downtown. I got another one, thankfully. And he actually presented before the United Nations on the topic of UFOs. I'd have to say that to date, ufology, it is a word, has arguably yet to produce a higher caliber scientist than J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée. Pretty sure that is Hynek on the top left of the image. Looks like he's smoking a pipe at the UN. You can't do that here in Roswell, by the way. Those cigarettes are not sanctioned indoors. Okay. When I mentioned that all these other authors have a foreword by Jacques Vallée, a modern author will get a huge boost of credibility if Vallée endorses your book. He doesn't even speak, very rarely, he did recently, on the UFO topic anymore, because he thinks most people have made up their mind on the topic and they don't want to hear from a scientist that this stuff is more spiritual than most people like to admit. He's a rich Silicon Valley internet entrepreneur nowadays anyway. But like Hynek, Vallée differs from most of the scientists in that he doesn't believe that UFOs are aliens from other planets. I already mentioned earlier how Hynek thought that phenomena in non-religious or non-spiritual terms said it was a psychic manifestation or perhaps another dimension of space and time. Now to a Christian, these are going to be loaded words if you hear a scientist say that. But when you look at the title that Vallée chose for his book, messengers of deception, how many know that the Greek word for angel actually literally translates messenger? Dr. Valet here has a scientific UFO book titled Revelations. So it's kind of interesting where true science leads some of these guys. As an eminent scientist, Valet championed what is now known among UFO researchers as the interdimensional hypothesis, opposed to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. While not a religious person, Valet documented in his books that 20th century UFO reports were identical in nature to demon possessions, occult initiations, and the fairy abductions of medieval times, and much more numerous, cruel, and sadistic than would be necessary if their goal were truly scientific. In 1979, he wrote that human beings have been forced into a bizarre game of deception by the UFO phenomena. In another book, he admits his astonishment that the very concept of a parallel between modern ufology and ancient folklore is still occasionally dismissed by what he says is believers in the theory that UFOs are nuts and bolts spacecraft. To him, that's a theory that just doesn't wash. As he came to believe, you're probably beginning to see the UFO phenomena, while testably real, it's real. It overlaps more with spirituality. The more you study it, and specifically what we tend to call occult forms of spirituality. That book title, The Occult Connection, UFOs, Secret Societies, and Ancient Gods by Ken Hudnall, covers that topic as well. Now these quotes on the side of it are not from the book, they're just off of the internet. Arthur Clarke, 2001 Space Odyssey. One theory that can no longer be taken very seriously is that UFOs are interstellar spacecraft. UFO behavior is more akin to magic than to physics. The UFO nauts and demons are probably identical. That FSR is Flying Saucer Review. A working knowledge of occult science is indispensable to UFO investigation. Trevor James, Flying Saucers. And from a MUFON symposium, studies of flying saucer cults repeatedly show that they are part of a larger occult social order. We're going to overview some of that, and we'll hit the biblical view pretty hard at the end. We're also going to see the technology, how the technology and the events leading to the 1947 incident finally begin to fit into this whole paradigm. And my last part on Roswell is not theological in any way, just what my research into some unclassified military history is going to show. It's theological only in the sense that it fits into the conspiracy verse I mentioned at the very beginning, though. And one person asked me during the break, where's the reading list, where I can get some of these books? I'm glad you asked that question. This lecture specifically is ufos101.com, and every book that I've put up here, there's an Amazon link to where you can buy the book. Some are out of print, and hey, I get 5% if you buy the book too, so I actually finally get paid if you click through those links. All right, thanks for hanging with me through all that, but this is a quick view, even quicker than we've seen before. We're just going to begin to explore the spiritual side of ufology. The first two I chose to put up are simply because of the connotations that their cover would have for a Christian audience. Alien, Rapture, The Chosen. The Elect, the Rapture, very Christian themes, but that's a UFO related book. That's a novel, isn't it? Ted would know. That's a novel. That's not even a real book. Oh, by the way, I don't want you to pretend. I don't want to put myself off for a minute. It's not like I've read all these books. Come on. Who's got that kind of time? I just buy them, put them on a shelf, make me look smart. But I do skim them. I skim them very thoroughly with highlighters and pencils and pull out quotes and findings for your benefit. The Secret War, The Heavens Speak of the Battle. This is a UFO book, but that image, it's similar to a very famous Christian painting of a winged individual and a scaly reptile kind of individual locked in combat. And that is a UFO book by Heidi Hollis. Chariots of the Gods, the classic, we've all heard it. Eric von Daniken has got many other books. These are books that the publishers did knockoff books because von Daniken was really selling. Gods, Demons, Space Chariots. That last one, it asks in the bottom, were the female demons of the Middle Ages who seduced mortal men, real women from other planets? Were the flaming shields from the skies which rescued Charlemagne's knights really interventions of visiting starmen? So you see the theme of old gods and fairies, demons. It overlaps with the what people report as aliens very frequently. Genesis revisited, Zecharia Sitchin. He makes the claim that aliens from another planet came upon Cro-Magnon, altered the DNA, and created Homo sapiens. Now, you can see why he's not, you won't find this book in your church bookstore, because that kind of goes against the view of that God created man in his own image to rule on this earth, stuff like that. I don't really affirm his book. And actually, if you're a fan of Sitchin, I've got to point you, Michael S. Heiser, PhD, he is a language specialist. He translates for a living ancient texts, dead languages. He's an academic editor for a software company. And he did a talk in Roswell called a credentialed PhD challenge to the work of Zecharia Sitchin, where Mike takes dictionary entries from the Sumerian tablets, where the Sumerians say, here's what this word means, and then he shows you what Genesis, or what Sitchin says the word means in his book, and Mike just asks you, honestly, who are you going to believe? It's not, he doesn't really, Mike's not mean-spirited, he's just an academic nerd, and when you read Mike, or when you view Mike's presentation with an open mind on that topic, many people, William Henry is real known in the New Age field, it changed his mind on Zecharia Sitchin's work, and it did Jim Mars as well. The gods have landed. They're new religions from other worlds. I can't even begin to document how many new religious and smaller groups have popped up in the last 50 years. Just on the contact with an alien or UFO sighting, there are entire books about the subject. The star people. Imagine the joy of finding out that you are one of the star people. Thousands of aliens now walking among us, the Steigers. Aliens Among Us from Ruth Montgomery. Dazzling true testimonies that extraterrestrials are on Earth about to usher in the new age. The back of the book even says, you've read Shirley MacLaine, now read, and she talks about how aliens are here to help bring about a new utopia on Earth. We Come as Friends, True Tales of Positive Alien Encounters. Just continuing in this whole vein in general, as opposed to organized groups, these are some of the authors, some of the books, just various degrees of notoriety or fallings. Star Wisdom, Principles of Pleiadian Spirituality. Bottom of it, from a highly advanced extraterrestrial civilization comes an uplifting message of universal wisdom offering a new vision for humanity. Calling on Extraterrestrials, she has 3 books. 11 Steps, I think, this is the 3rd book. How to Invite Your Own UFO Encounters. So just from this sampling of covers, you can see there is indeed an entire subculture of contactees, or you might use the phrase, some would say channelers, who are hearing from and faithfully reproducing the teachings of these entities, for good or bad, depending on your point of view. Christians generally will see this as demonic. I'll give you a little more on why they would actually arrive at that conclusion shortly. But speaking of Christians, before switching the screen here, I'm going to caution Christians that these covers are pretty offensive. Not nudity or anything, but because of what the covers imply. First, from the cover of the MUFON Journal, January 1998, coincidentally, the same month I put up my first website, the book I showed you at the beginning. I didn't even know what MUFON was back then. The text at the bottom there reads, Elijah's Abduction. The premise, of course, is that Elijah, and as you expand this line of thinking to the entire Bible, that Jesus himself, when they ascended, were taken aboard a spaceship. Not endorsing that idea. I'm introducing probably to some an entire field or belief system that I found is probably the most prevalent, or at least common, among the people who study UFOs from a lay perspective. This is what you're getting from a lot of speakers, books, websites, and TV shows. And I will say it's because these sources are actually delivering content on the topic that people are interested in, but the church is not. So this is the views that gets airtime, because the church as a whole won't even speak on the topic. I did an entire 90-minute lecture, though, dedicated to rebutting just this single line of thinking. But beyond Elijah and Jesus, we have what a book describes perhaps millions of people being rescued by UFOs in the end times, aka the rapture, or a false rapture. Listen to the talk I did last year online, Ancient of Days. Before all these coming earthquakes and other cataclysms go down, you've got to be at least vaguely familiar with the Raelians. They make it in the news every now and then. They're the ones who have claimed to perfect human clothing. What they say, cloning is the secret to eternal life, and that the aliens their religion is founded upon are keeping Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, etc. alive today via the process of cloning, and that if you become a good alien, you get eternal life through cloning. The text on the cover reads, neither supernatural God nor evolution, the truth about our extraterrestrial origins. What they mean is that what the aliens who had forbidden such experimentation on their homeworld, they came here when our planet was just land and oceans, and that they, the aliens, created all life on Earth. Now that we're to the point of understanding DNA, cloning, things like that, they're coming back to invite us to join them, as long as we acknowledge that they are our creators, and in effect, our gods. They also say that the Bible tells their whole story, although imperfectly, because people back then didn't really know what they were seeing, but that fire by night, cloud by day thing, that was a UFO, or spacecraft, they claim. The star that the Magi followed to find their previous representative, Jesus, that was a UFO. The Immaculate Conception, artificial insemination of an earth woman dealing with an alien. All the encounters in the Bible dealing with an angel or the voice of God, they will say that was aliens. This whole book tells you that story from their thing, and so on. Here's just a little more of their literature or their tracts. It's worth pointing out that the primary recruiting method of the group is the bonus is that there's something of a sex cult, which encourage multiple partners. If I ever backslide, I know the next group I'm joining. But now some might find it odd that a bona fide UFO cult would make these claims, or you wouldn't find it odd that a cult would make these claims. But the Bible and Flying Saucers says much the same thing, and it's written by an ordained Christian minister. If you've seen these shows on TV, you'll see him with his black outfit and white collar. It says much the same things. You might occasionally see him on TV, like I said, but from the back of the book, the burning bush, the word of God spoken by an alien messenger, the pillar of fire and cloud, ancient descriptions of a flying saucer, parting of the Red Sea, proof of the visitor's anti-gravitational powers, angelic visions, one-to-one encounters with extraterrestrials. This remarkable book provides the answers, it says, and it's billed as exploring the Bible's greatest mysteries from a fresh, modern perspective. Now, it's just Barry Downing's view, but it made him quite popular in ufology as a minister and a theologian who claims that the Bible tells more of flying saucers than it tells of supernatural interventions, God or angels. No, this is not a bestseller. I met this guy, Tim Guy, but the book cover does a great job, I think, representing what not just the aliens, but what so many other people are saying about the UFO phenomena. Just pull back the mask, and you will see that Jesus was an extraterrestrial. You'll also be interested to note that some of the early mentioned or theory of aliens creating life on Earth could be coming soon to a public school near you. This is under intelligent design. This is the non-Christian response to the Christian effort at intelligent design teaching in school. Okay, well, life may have been designed by some supernatural being, maybe God, but maybe by aliens. That view is going to get equal time in school if the more intelligent design from a Christian perspective succeeds in school, the more this teaching is going to succeed too. As far as organized religion, it's worth noting that Mormons assume for life on other planets because their version of God was once a man who followed the Mormon way and became God. And if you're a good Mormon man anyway, you also get to be God of your own planet one day. So I'm going to overstep a boundary a little bit here, but I don't think it's entirely off base to say that Mormonism might rightly be called the first or the original UFO cult. Although their founding had to do with an angelic encounter, without the mention of a craft, the most fundamental founding doctrines of Mormonism depend upon life existing elsewhere, because that's where their God came from. Mormons are far from the coolest UFO group, though. This is an article on Scientology. By design, not many people know about the upper details of the Church of Scientology, founded by L. Ron Hubbard, but between the ex-members who have spoken out, some good investigative journalism, and even court orders in one case, we find that their founding doctrines involve extraterrestrials. This article, maybe 2 months old, appeared in the LA Times. Thank you. I'm going to read it. At these higher levels, at a potential cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you're a member, you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars before you get this secret. Scientologists learn Hubbard's secret theory of human suffering, which he traces to a galactic battle waged 75 million years ago by an evil tyrant named Xenu, X-E-N-U. But the court orders, or a court case, made these finally available to the public. And if you, Rolling Stone, February 23rd, 2006, look up that article, huge article on Scientology. She was actually granted access to the headquarters and got the stories of ex-members and very happy members. Did the most even-handed reporting on Scientology you're going to see anywhere. And just for fun, Google South Park and Scientology. And you can watch online the banned video, the Even South Park, but it includes John Travolta and Tom Cruise and actually shows you the evil alien overlord Xenu. It's a whole episode. It's a whole episode. But aside from Heaven's Gates, the Raelians, there's the Urantia Foundation. I skipped ahead on the slide there. It's based on a channeled book from the 50s, and I believe that it reinterprets or explains the Bible along extraterrestrial terms. It's somewhat, I think all that's enough to give you a picture for what's supposed to be an introductory talk. Before going through some other covers, I do a side speech on this whole thing that's really only popular, or it's only really appropriate for Christian settings. Luckily for you, I'm going to skip about 2 pages, but if you want to invite me sometime, we'll get into it. But that's the basis of, with all this that's going on, the cults and the belief systems, do you believe God's Word addresses the topic we're all here to study and learn about? But I did promise a more orthodox biblical view, so let's zoom in. Zooming in on covers. Earth's earliest ages, there's nothing new under the sun. And we'll get to this soon, but what I'm going to suggest is that the most biblical view of the phenomena is found in the opening chapters of the Bible. This book is reprinted from the 1800s, which correctly predicted the rise of Spiritism in the West, what we now call the New Age movement. And as we go through these titles, we'll notice a pattern that what many, not all, but most Christian UFO researchers have found who've spent examining this topic. They don't think it's a good thing either, but I think you know that already. The Amazon description on that previous book says, a study of Genesis 1 through 6, plus an extended discussion of Eastern religions and the occult. This book, UFOs and Mystery Clouds, I include it because it's old, from the 70s. Zola Levitt is a co-author. Popular guy. Never hear him talk about UFOs in the 90s or recent decades because it doesn't make you popular. The Mystery Clouds, another old one. What I'm saying is just the titles, like I said earlier, just these titles are going to give you the view without even cracking a book open. UFO, End Time Delusion. UFOs and the Alien Agenda. Bob Larson, if you're a pastor, you probably have his book, Kingdom of the Cults, on your shelf. This is his book on UFOs. Alien Obsession, What Lies Behind Abduction, Sightings, and the Attraction to the Paranormal, Ron Rhodes. Space Invaders by William or Bill Schneblin. We've got that out on our table for $2 because he's got a newer version of it now. Route 666. Cute. Space Invaders, there again. UFO Cults in the New Millennium, William Allner, who's now a PhD journalism professor. UFOs in the New Age. From a PhD journalism professor with a just the facts attitude, you can say he's got a Christian axe to grind, but extraterrestrial messages and the truth of Scripture, where he compares what ETs have told people to what the Bible says about certain topics. The real truth about UFOs and the New World Order connection. Millennial Deception, Aliens, Angels, and the Antichrist. Cosmic Conspiracies, Stan Deyo spoke at our conference last year. Alien Encounters, The Secret Behind the UFO Phenomena, with the notation that Chuck Missler and Mark Eastman have probably got the best-selling Christian book on UFOs in the topic. Nephilim and the Pyramid of the Apocalypse, loaded word if you're going to talk about UFOs. Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection, similar to what Zecharia Sitchin would say, that you cannot discuss, this guy's view is you cannot discuss aliens without affirming evolution. Lights in the Sky, Little Green Men, a rational Christian look at UFOs. The Fallen, that's a novel, but it's just a novel, but it's by a professor of missions at a Baptist college. Nephilim, the whole Genesis 6 paradigm. The Facade, Dr. Michael Heiser, PhD, the one I mentioned earlier. This is if you want a book that does the best amalgam, like bringing together what do all these factual UFO reports that I've talked about earlier have to do, and how do you incorporate that theologically, this book does it. He does it in novel format, but he has several academic papers that the novel is based on. One of his popular talks that he's done at the Bay Area UFO Conference, the Washington, D.C. X Conference. Mike's a regular on Coast to Coast. You probably heard him, whether you knew that was him or not, is could Christianity accommodate a genuine ET reality? And Mike very affirmatively argues yes, and I agree with this. The Bible has no statement saying that it doesn't exist. And Mike covers that argument in conversation in this book, as well as many other topics. But it's based on UFO research and theology, not on dogma, not on fear. And it's made him very popular in non-Christian circles for being brave enough to lose his credibility and popularity with many Christian audiences just to cover this topic. The Omega Conspiracy, it's out of print by I.D.E. Thomas. There's an Amazon link on UFOs101.com. You might find a used copy. Again, what's important in this field? Cool cover. Aliens and Fallen Angels, the Sexual Corruption of the Human Race. The last one, these are my 3 most recommended books on a biblical view of this topic, if you want to find those. That's only available on Steve, with a V, stevequayle.com. He doesn't deal with corporates or Amazon or anything. I recommend all these far above my own book. So you've got the feeling that what these Christian authors have uncovered with their researchers, that this is not all goodness and light, right? Whatever they are, they're not benevolent, they're not here to help, and they don't offer mankind spiritual truth, although almost every contactee message on record is about spirituality, creation, where we're going. And that the most well-studied researchers aren't buying the idea that they're really from other planets. Just the key words right there from those covers: agenda, obsession, deceivers, invaders, 666, UFO cults, invasion, New World Order, fallen, facade, delusion, Antichrist. Now I'm going to try to summarize all those books for you. But one quote from many of the books, I'm going to give you one quote from Ron Rhodes' book, and then some papers that are on the internet to wrap that point up. An examination of the evidence indicates beyond any doubt that a primary agenda of the alien visitors, whoever or whatever they are, is to change the way human beings think about God and His Word, to replace exclusive Christianity with a religion of universalism. As well, the visitors seem intent on drawing people deeper and deeper into various forms of occultism, including divination, out-of-body experiences, clairvoyance, and spiritism. And that's Ron Rhodes from Alien Obsession. And what he means, the primary agenda is to change the way people think about God, is God says He's a personal, intimate being who created you and I for fellowship, and that the way to know Him is through the incarnation of God in the flesh, Jesus Christ. The aliens say the universe is an impersonal force, that we're all one already, that we're already part of God. And well, you know where I stand, but I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you of one argument or the other. But it's because of the channeled messages, or the recorded messages of ETs, this is where Christians begin to get the idea that it's demonic. It could just be that the aliens disagree, you know what I mean? But that's what fuels this. It's the messages. It's not the possibility of life on other planets that Christians can't handle somehow. It used to be church doctrine that it was heresy to say that there wasn't life on other planets, because that would limit God. That's a 12-year-old kid would come up with that philosophy. But it used to be church doctrine. If you said there is no life on other planets, you were a heretic because you were limiting God. It's called the principle of plenitude. But it's when you read the messages that we're going to go through here, that's what begins to fuel this demonic idea, which you're going to see I'm going to debunk myself. You never know where I'm coming from. We are not alone in the universe. This is channeled messages. This Earth has been visited many times in the past and by different types of ETs involved with our creation, evolution, religions, myths. Some contactees are told that humans are the consequence of ET encounters with earlier. Rael, the chosen prophet of the railing movement, he says it's about clothing at the bottom. Whatever the explanation, we're consistently told that ETs were involved with our creation and ongoing evolution. Some contactees are told that humankind now stands in the transitional period before the dawn of the new age. Everybody else in the Christians say, oh, it's the end times. You know what I mean? So there's a conflict there. Space beings are helped to teach us to awaken the human spirit. Basically, they're saying to save yourselves or we'll help you. You don't need a personal God or anything like that. If the earthlings should not raise their vibratory rate, several earth changes will appear or happen, like it's our choice. Like we could prevent earthquakes and typhoons if we would just be a little more spiritual. And why can't we all just get along? A major leap in consciousness and evolution is about to take place. All these are signs to facilitate the shift toward a new age that the harmonic convergence of aliens will bring about. Dr. Vallée also notes that there are authoritarian overtones to some of the messages given to contactees. Democracy is obsolete. Elections should be done away with. Racist ideologies are encouraged because some of us have more alien DNA than others, they say. Therefore, that makes a superior master race. The more alien you are, the more right you have to subjugate basic humans. He believes a control system is being set up by this phenomena to challenge belief systems. It's all New Age messages. You know, you get where I'm going. Man is or is becoming God, whatever. So many Christians, both longtime researchers and after they've examined the fruit of the UFO phenomena, like the sheer torment many abductees are subjected to, and then the unbiblical messages aliens are giving mankind, they come to the conclusion, say something like, well, them aren't really space aliens, people talking to at all. Them are just demons, plain and simple. That's not far off the mark, but there's a few problems with the view that become very apparent as you study things out. That's a verse that is probably in every one of those books that I showed you. The Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, the Christian faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. That verse is applied in every one of those books, and this one probably is too. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but rulers of high places. Let me buzz this through. You know we're going over on time, so I'm going to do. Here's where I was going. As a Christian, I see some serious problems with the demonic view. The best secular research in this field shows that these so-called aliens take physical form, and interact with humans, even to the point of creating babies. Can you show me one verse in Scripture where a demon was ever even physically present, where a person could see him, much less talk to him? All we know biblically of demons is that they're discarnate spirits which seek to inhabit humans, to possess them. But where in the Bible do you see a demon? You don't. You don't have cohabitation. All the research I've shown you, there's some serious nuts and bolts technology involved. Whether mankind was given the technology from aliens or demons, that is the debate. But you can't look up in the sky and see something and say it's a demon. To my mind, the only thing that can correlate with fallen angels or demons is the contactee messages, but not the UFO technology itself. Physical entities, it's not in the Bible. You don't see demons as acting in the physical world. Google the phrase origin of demons, and you're going to find two articles by Dr. Chris Ward and by Tom Brown, and you'll see why there's a big difference between what we call angels and demons. What this boils down to is semantics. There's angels can do all the things reportedly attributed to aliens, including producing offspring with human women. But demons are not fallen angels. So aliens are not demons, is the point I'm making. Finally, have you ever tried using the word demon in a sentence? How far did that get you? You just can't be taken seriously. So I will often say angelic because it's more theologically correct. You might think it's just semantics, but the Bible makes the distinction. Here's angels taking flesh. There's several levels, ranks, or whatever of demons, but angels ate food with Abraham. They were mistaken for human. Jesus in resurrected form, like after he died and came back, he ate food. This spiritual state of immortality is still physical enough to eat food. I don't know if you got to go to the bathroom afterwards or not, or you get one of those little Star Trek things that just makes it all go away. Depart from me, you fire prepared for the devil and his. No, it's not demons, it's angels. Point is, anytime you see that word in parentheses is really angel. Demons aren't doing these things that people are saying. But when did angels take physical form and cohabitate with humans to produce offspring? It was Genesis 6. It came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, daughters were born. The sons of God saw the daughters of men were fair, and they took what they chose. I'm going to have to ad lib a bit here. I'm really about done with the notes. I'll let the PowerPoint take me away for, is it 10:30? We got half an hour then. Okay. There were giants, Nephilim, the sons of God, again. The problem within Christianity is that this view is taught, that this is just the tip of the iceberg I'm going to go over, is that those weren't really angels in Genesis 6:2. Certain lineage of humankind that was not supposed to intermarry. That's not what the Bible says in the English, the Greek, or the Hebrew, or anything. When you see the phrase sons of God in the Old Testament, it refers only to angels. It refers never to humans. We don't make the mistake of reading the New Testament definition of who are the sons of God into the Old Testament. Here's to Israel, the Old Testament stood for itself. You're a little boy in Sabbath school, you ask your rabbi, what does that phrase sons of God mean in Genesis, in the Torah? He is not going to answer, well, that means you're a born-again believer in Yeshua Messiah. It had a meaning all of its own, and it referred to the angels. The Christian church, by and large, does not believe that, though. Other uses of the sons of God, we're talking about angels, Satan, the devil. Where were you when the sons of God shouted for joy? Let me go fast. Old Testament, sons of God are always angels, while believers are servants. Lord, look upon your servants with glory. In the New Testament, that role is reversed. Now we are the sons of God. As many as received him, he gave power to become the sons of God. And then the role is reversed. Angels are referred to as servants in the New Testament. Which of the angels, the bottom part, are they all, not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister to them, minister for them who shall be heirs of salvation? They are our servants, and in the pecking order, redeemed or born-again humanity is higher than angels. We're raised up. New Testament affirmations of Genesis 6, if God spared not the angels that sinned. You throw out this Genesis 6 paradigm, where in the Bible does it ever mention angels that sinned? It's not there. You have to go to Genesis 6 for this answer. Noah, it pins the time. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, also angels which kept not their first estate, whether that's fleshly or position or whatever. Again, that's a New Testament affirmation of this view. The New Testament mentions the sins of the angels leaving their first estate, compares the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, and pins the timing to the events of the days of Noah. The New Testament is talking about angels in Genesis 6. Kicked out of, believe that though. Chris Ward, when he first started putting this on the internet, got the left boot of fellowship from his denomination too. Common objection, Jesus said, but in the resurrection we don't marry or are given in marriage, but we become. What Christians will say is, well, the Bible says angels can't marry and therefore presumably have sex. Looking carefully at that verse, if you don't have the preconceived notion, he says the angels in heaven do not marry. He did not state that angels in general. So you have to add to the word to create, and you have to ignore the rest of the verses we just went through to maintain it. An unmarried Christian, like the angels of God in heaven, an unmarried Christian does not have sex. He's physically capable of doing so. I'm personally abstinent, not because I have sex. It's a behavior thing. Unless you consider being fat and bald as physically impossible for me to. But that always gets a good groan. This actually, the view tells you why God selected Noah. The word perfect in his perfect. He was a pure human. He was not a hybrid. It's the same word used for the sacrificial lambs that had to be perfect and without spot or blemish. He was genetically perfect. It's not because he was the best guy around. He got drunk and naked right after the whole flood event. Explains why God told Joshua to kill the other nations. They were Nephilim. They were trying to retake over the human bloodline. The rest of the Old Testament is gods versus the gods and Israel versus the giants. But the factual basis for all the Greco-Roman mythological gods, that Genesis 6 verse I gave you earlier, it says that these hybrid creations were the heroes of old, the men of renown, the mythological gods. When Zeus mated with a mortal woman, and that's how Hercules was born, that is a retelling of what Genesis 6 is telling you actually happened. A supernatural entity mated with an earth human, and that's the basis of all what we call mythology. I believe it's true. It was wiped out in the flood for the most part. Actually, it's a colorized wood carving. This depicts Genesis 6. It's from the Renaissance era. Guy found it in a book, black, white, colorized, and lets me use it on my website. But as far as comparing Genesis 6, angels mating with human women, to the Roman gods, that's a very famous statue. It's a postcard, actually. That's the Cupid and Psyche, I believe, mating to create offspring. The angelic view of Genesis 6, and this is really apologetics to Christians, because they do not believe this view. I don't care if you do or not. It's the church that actually says, but it is what the Bible says in any language. It was the Orthodox Jewish view for all millennia BC. It was the early church's view for 4 centuries. And it makes you understand Matthew 24:37. Now, when I said there's nothing new under the sun, Genesis 6 is the only biblical view that takes the modern abduction hybridization at face value and provides a biblical activity. Otherwise, there is something new under the sun, and we need to throw out our Bibles. Because if I believe you that you've had an experience with a supernatural entity that's trying to have sex with you in some cases, I can either show you a worldview in the Bible that tells you you're not crazy, yes, that does go on, or I can tell you to get out of my office because I don't believe this Genesis 6 crap. And that's why a lot of people wind up in UFO cults. The church won't have them. They won't minister to them from the Bible. They'd rather send them to a psychiatrist than to the Bible or to Jesus. The Sethite, the opposing view, never heard of in human history before the 4th century. It is what's taught in seminaries, but it's a deceptive doctrine that denies the truth of Scripture. The external resources. This is something we have on our table. Also gets you in trouble with some churches. It's the Jewish book of Enoch. That's a version that we have, different cover. It tells the story, several chapters of Genesis 6. It goes into the names of the angels, the technology that they gave mankind before the flood, why God was mad about the sexual interaction and teaching mankind warlike ways. They gave us the technology of metallurgy, certain sorceries. It's several chapters of what you read as a couple sentences in Genesis 6 is in the book of Enoch. But this, from Jude chapter 1 in the New Testament, this is a direct quote from the book of Enoch. And why I put that part in yellow, the Bible makes several references to other books, even satanic books. It even quotes them for illustrative purposes. Eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. But what it says about the book of Enoch is that that's prophecy. It's Holy Spirit-inspired prophecy. It does have, to many Jewish groups 2,000 years ago, some Christians today, will argue that it should have been canonized. But it was political reasons within the church that wanted to debunk this Genesis 6 view of Enoch heresy. Possibly predates the flood. It was considered canon by many, gave the Jews the idea that Messiah would be God in the flesh. That is not an Old Testament teaching. The book of Enoch actually lets you see that Messiah will be God in the flesh. And before the New Testament came along, it includes phrases like the tree of life and the book of life, resurrection and judgment, and then the hope of the elect with the divine Son of Man. Son of Man, it's all over the book of Enoch. It's nowhere in the New Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus referred to himself as Son of Man over 80 times. He was affirming the book of Enoch, saying that I'm the one in that book who sits on the clouds. It was banned, the book of Enoch was banned for affirming the view of Genesis 6. found in the Dead Sea. First, it was found in the 1800s, translated in English. Christians thought, no way. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls affirmed that it was legitimate. Great detail about the angels that sinned, like I said. Modern academic Christian academia, college, accepts the Book of Enoch now as legitimate without having to argue that it's canon. It's an apocalyptic writing. This is a guy's PhD thesis comparing the Book of Enoch to the Book of Daniel and how they're similar in overlap and are of equal weight. So, to just an overview, the tip of the iceberg on Genesis 6, and the credibility of modern UFO reports. They were covered at this Ancient of Days conferences we've done, but I also brought in 2005, okay, well, if all this is true, where's this going? So our 2005 conference dealt with UFOs and Bible prophecy. If Genesis 6 is true, that changes your whole view of the Old Testament, why God was saying kill these people. Because he's a wanton, crazed murderer that none of us want to know about if this Genesis 6 view is not true. But how does that affect the future? That's a whole nother day's conference, but it's there, and that's the one I said you can listen to my opening lecture for free online, but that's the prophetic verse. Days of Noah. If you want to know what the world is going to look like right before Jesus returns, look at Noah, the days of Noah. You've got supernatural entities imparting technology. That's what the world is going to look like. So that's why that has implications. Last couple minutes, I'll give you my overview of man-made UFOs. All this is on RoswellUFOcrash.com. In the 40s, had round flying machines, prototypes. We have the plans, we have the CIA historian quotes. They were working on things like this. They never got them operational, at least not on the massive scale. There's a CIA historian who says, we know he had a secret weapon. It's what we would today call a flying saucer. If he'd gotten that operational, the Allied forces would have come across a whole new weapon which they had no defenses against. Hitler would have taken over if he'd perfected this. Here's when Nazi scientists went to Nuremberg, some of them, 126, were brought over to the United States. This was not declassified information until the 1970s. They worked in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and in Texas. We brought them over here for the sole purpose of giving the United States this technology they were working on and for perfecting it, and especially to keep the Russians from getting it. This is their class photo, though, now that this is declassified info. But if you lost two sons fighting in World War II, in 1944-45, how thrilled would you be to find out in 1946 that now they're on our payroll? Cover-up. Wasn't declassified until the 70s. We know what the top photo is. The bottom is a German craft from 1944. Couple good books. Man-Made UFOs. It's got pictures, documented stuff. Hitler's Flying Saucers, a guide to German flying discs of the Second World War. So what I'm kind of posing here is, if we know they were brought over here to New Mexico in 1945 and 46 to build that type of stuff, and then a year after they get their bases going, something crashes in the middle of the desert and the government covers it up, where do you think it came from, honestly, if this stuff is true and proven? This is my theory. It's only theory. But author William Lynn documents much of what's going on with a secret energy propulsion system that's far beyond, that NASA is really a cover for, showing that we're really here technologically with NASA, but behind closed doors. Nikola Tesla, his stated goal, I believe in the 1870s, his stated goal in entering college was to build an electric flying machine that ran on free energy. And he worked for both the Americans and the Germans. When Tesla died in the 40s, every invention and patent he had was confiscated and classified by the government. Now, I don't have to convince you of everything in this book because the man who wrote the book himself is our last speaker today. So you'll hear him make this case, but only fiction really sells. as Steven Spielberg can tell you, but the genuine research hasn't made anybody I know of really rich or even popular. Even the CIA-sponsored guys, they've got to sell books just to get by. But so many people, and I'm referring to our speakers today, this is a labor of love. So it doesn't make them popular, it doesn't make them money. This is just my encouragement to support these guys by buying their books, look at their table, talk to them, go on their website, help them out. Nobody's funding UFO research but independent researchers. I don't have this scanned, but back on Nick Redford, one of the most popular ufologists out there, he is also proposing the man-made view. Body snatchers in the middle of the desert. He and I emailed, and I didn't know he was writing on this book, and I gave him some of my good info. But here's a couple of another one. This is very rare. Here in Roswell, Frank Kaufman died recently, and Robert Shirky, they have the book, I Was There. They participated in the Roswell cleanup. They picked up the metal, and they took it to Hangar 84. Frank Kaufman, who was an art student, this is what he drew. Doesn't look like what you see in downtown Roswell, though, does it? Your question on this man-made view of Roswell, what about the bodies? You Google or look up human experimentation. Human experimentation on citizens without their consent was not made illegal until the 80s by an act of Congress. I'm proposing, just like we send monkeys up, that is a child with progeria. That's another image. It's possible. Nick takes the view that they were nuclear torture victims, that the Japanese and the Germans, especially the Japanese, had a habit of like ripping off an arm and attaching it to another body to see what would happen, doing high altitude tests on undesirables in society before we put our crack pilots into these ships. Down, golly. Oh, well, I think we'll just wind down here. These are some of my web resources. Alienstranger.com gets you to all of my sites. The books I highly recommend on the biblical view again. I've told you Rich Dolan and all the people from part one of these presentations. This is, do I have another slide? Yeah, my original book, it's online for free, or you can pay $380. This is the last time I saw a copy of it on Amazon. So we've got about 15 minutes where I'm going to take a nap and go to lunch. We need to, we will allow some questions. There's wanted to put on here. But as far as why you should care, I think you do care about this topic, even if you're a skeptic, but perhaps you've just been a little underinformed. What I've hoped to be able to help you with all these things is, even if you disagree with some of my views, I don't care. But if you get out there and learn 10 times more on this topic than I've been able to give you today, that would be great, because you'll teach others. We hope. And I definitely don't think that I have all the answers on this either. After all this research, the best I can honestly say is that I'm simply asking better questions than I used to. I hope this talk has helped you along that path, but I'm actually looking forward to learning more from today's speakers, because I don't know it all. And you are going to notice that not all of today's speakers do agree on much of anything, and that's okay, because no one's here to convince or convert you of anything, merely to present their research and their piece of the pie that they've spent years hammering out. You can absorb it, weigh it, test everything, and then use what you learn to further your own knowledge pool. As far as, it's funny, I want to butt these disagreeing views. I mentioned earlier how Christians and ufologists are not exactly the best of friends in most cases, but I think it's ironic that, given the stereotypes that we're all the most familiar with, that Dennis, who argues for an alien explanation of the Roswell incident, is a Christian, and he has no trouble incorporating all that possibility into his theology. The lecture you're going to see here today, he's presented at your church in First Baptist Church. You've done this very lecture in a church setting, and he argues for the alien view. But the one guy beside me, and I'm suggesting it, but the one guy who's going to most ardently argue against the alien explanation is Bill Lynn. You'd probably call him an atheist. He definitely hates religion, or he hates falsehood, and there's a lot of that in religion. And I'm going to warn you before Bill comes up tonight that never, ever, not once in his life, has Bill Lynn ever won a congeniality contest. He's not miscongenial. He's this year's wild card player. if you know what I mean. We're going to go out with a bang or a fist fight. I honestly don't know. But he's going to say things that I'll disagree with, and probably many of you will too. But he does have some amazing knowledge into this man-made stuff and the cover-up that the government's doing. I'm looking forward to learning from. But even in today's relatively small conference, which is not sanctioned by the, you're going to hear enough divergent views just on Roswell alone to make you think that the CIA is sponsoring this event, just to throw more confusion in views and keep us all from knowing what's really going on. But my intention is, I just want to present you with some solid information that these fellas should be able to document for you fairly, convincingly, and to make you see that a lot of effort's gone into keeping the public in the dark about this very real topic. I've had enough of that darkness in my life, or enough of darkness in general. A lot of it was my own doing, I'll say, and I'm not going to make this a see the light kind of talk like I said earlier. I won't go down that road, but if there's something interested in more you're knowing about in other topics, you know where to find me. As promised, I have to close with the last page of Frank Scully's Behind the Flying Saucers. Y'all remember? This is the back. It's unclear from the context whether these are his words or something he quoted, because he has, we'd call it an appendix, but it's really not. It seems to be his arguments or his responses to things he's read. But myth or fact, if proof is forthcoming from that the flying saucers carry visitors from another planet, then the biblical story of creation and Christianity are disproved according to one reader. The fact is that first, that if is a big one. Besides that, the Bible and Christianity are God's provision for dealing with the children of Adam of this earth. Moreover, the truth of all that is contained in the Bible and Christianity in no way excluded the possibility that God has created other groups of intelligent beings who may or may not inhabit other planets. In fact, the Bible tells us many times of a group of intelligent beings called angels. It even records the visitations of a few of these beings to our earth. God has told us about the angels. There could be other beings he has created about which he has told us nothing. After all, there are some men who find it difficult to accept what he has told them. Frank Scully, 1950, Behind the Flying Saucers. That was the situation then, and that's the situation today. I'll say thanks for your time, and how much time we have? Let me give you the ground rules. The way we do question and answer format is we don't hand off a microphone to anybody. We like you to keep your questions succinct, and if you want to ask a question, ask a question. Don't state a life story or a theology, but the speaker, make it short enough that the speaker can repeat it into the microphone. And I'll repeat those rules, those ground rules when the other speakers come and more people show up. Like I said, I just want to take a nap, but if you've got to ask a question, please do. Thank you. Yes.
Where is your bookstore?
We are currently located at 706 West 2nd. It's across from Dairy Queen, Roswell, New Mexico 88203 for DVD purposes. It's Alien Resistance HQ or alienresistance.org, and there is a link to HQ on the website where you can get all that. Sir.
I was wondering, is there any reason why the UFO museum isn't sanctioning this conference? Because it's a Roswell UFO festival. I mean, it would be nice if they could coordinate with everybody.
We could all get along.
Because there's like groups are going to their events, groups are going to this one. It would be nice if we could all go to it.
His question is every tourist's question. Why isn't the UFO Museum or official UFO Festival working with everything going on in town? Dennis Balthizer will answer that. Next question. No. Balthizer. It's hard to say. They actually have used the word competition in relating to my events. When I first moved to Roswell, this is actually on the lecture I said you could listen to online, I had the book, UFOs and the Bible. They refused to carry it in their gift store because they had a policy against anything dealing with religion. Then I took it to the Christian bookstore, and they wouldn't care because it dealt with UFOs. So I stayed a while and opened my own place, and they created a monster that they've had to live with. I'd be living in Nashville now if they'd have just carried my book. But it's not like I wake up. No, I'll skip that. But There are people with other ideas than the UFO Museum wants to sell or endorse. You just got to drive down downtown Roswell to see where we're making our money. And anybody that challenges that view or possibility is going to be suspect and may or may not be popular. Now, most people, I say, I don't look at it as competition. I look at it as more reason to come to Roswell. The more there is going on, the more people have to choose from. People will want to come and they'll want to come back. Another reason they don't sanction this is because, crafty devil that I am, I've got RoswellUFOcrash.com. How did a Johnny-come-lately move to Roswell and get that when nobody else got it? What else have I got? RoswellUFOfestival.com. It's my site where I publish what you're asking for, one comprehensive listing of every event going on in town, no matter who's asking, no matter who's sponsoring it. The newspaper printed it. On the internet, people link to it because it's the most comprehensive and most valuable to their readers and tourists. But like I said, they don't sanction everything, and they don't want to agree with or affirm with everything. So it's a relationship that I'm praying about and trying to email and reconcile, because I think it will serve our tourists much better if there is one master list. That was actually an easy question I got to kill a lot of time with. Don't have to go into theology or anything. Yes, ma'am.
Would you say that perhaps the main reason people find this subject of spaceships from other worlds uncomfortable to deal with, or they don't want to talk about it, it's taboo, is because it has to do with God and religion, because you cannot rule out this factor, and religion is not popular, but not a popular subject. It makes people uncomfortable. Would you say?
Yeah, she's asking, is this topic taboo because the idea of other lives brings up questions about God and religion's often a taboo thing. Yes, that is true. Last year at that Hollywood conference, I moderated the panel discussion with all the other speakers that were there. Every freaking question was about God, religion, spirituality, creation, our place in the universe. That's what people are asking when they're asking the UFO question. I was joking. Is anybody not going to ask what's the oldest known UFO photo published, or who did this or that? For an hour and a half, it was all various views, whether you call it New Age or not. But I think the answer to your question, everybody else is willing to talk about it. It's only the church that's taboo, not because it brings up religion. It's taboo because it challenges traditional religious beliefs that many in positions don't want to deal with. They got their seminary degree. Here's what it said. And if you've got a tough, in fact, that's why Mike Heiser is unemployable. He taught his kids, he taught theology for 12 years off and on, but it was distance learning mostly, or online in recent years. He said the problem that him and one other professor, that they asked him to leave after 2 years, I'm thinking, is that their kids left their classes asking questions that other professors didn't want to deal with. The view was, here's what's gone before in history. Here's what theologians have said. We're going to teach it all to you. Now stand on their shoulders and go ask better questions and do bigger things. But the establishment, any establishment, just wants to keep the status quo. So not every establishment does, but that's very normal. We run it, anybody that has a job knows that. You don't rock the boat.
Who wrote Dark Sun?
Does anybody here know who wrote Dark Sun? Because I do not.
It's about Nazi secret weapons and what he calls the post-war Allied legend.
He is going to republish